Thank you, everybody. My name's Flint, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking me. It's a big honor to be here. My prayer is that I'll say something tonight that'll be useful and helpful to somebody. That's why we speak, to say what it was, what happened, and, what it's like now, and to share the miracle of recovery. To me, it's a miracle. It's a fantastic gift from the God of my understanding. And so my prayer is that something I'll say will be useful and helpful to somebody tonight. I went to my first meeting in 1979, and I heard the problem, and I heard the solution, and I related to every single word. And that night I made myself a promise that as long as I live, no matter what, I would never, ever attend another AA meeting. I did go to my first meeting in 1979. I'm from the West Coast. I grew up in the area of Los Angeles, and my drinking buddy, a guy named Randy, he discovered AA before I did, and he took me to a meeting in 1979, but it didn't catch until 1986. Those years between 79 and 86 were, you know how the bottom gets worse and worse, and I finally got sober March 1st, 86, which means that on March 1st, here coming up in a few days, I'll have 34 years sober, which is half my life because I'm 68. And I told my wife, I said, I don't look 68, do I? She said, you used to. I drank for 20 years. I started drinking when I was 14, and I quit when I was 34. I got sober in San Diego, California. I come from a middle-class home. My dad was a school teacher. My mom worked in a doctor's office. I had one older sister who's passed. They're all passed now. I'm the only alcoholic in that immediate family. There was no alcoholics in the family. I've heard that my mom's dad might have been alcoholic. He drank a lot, had some horror stories to tell. But he died when I was 3, so I don't know. As far as I knew, I was the only alcoholic under that roof. Alcoholism is a disease and it has symptoms. And drinking is this is my opinion, drinking is just one symptom. There are other symptoms to it, like low self-esteem and these kinds of things. When I was a kid, I didn't like being me. It was a mystery to me about how to be a person, how to be a boy, how to do life. It was a mystery to me. I didn't like myself. There was something wrong. And I don't know, my sister didn't like me either. She was older sister, 5 years older, and she hated my guts, and it was just a weird situation. My mother and father had a kind of a funny on and off again relationship. They figured that as long as everything looked okay on the outside, then everything was okay. And I suppose if you looked at that family on the outside, we did look okay, in the neighborhood and stuff. And I don't know, I can't speak for the other 3 of them, but I was not okay. And I don't know why. I don't know why. It was just hard to be me. I was a good kid, basically. I got in trouble later, but when I was 14, a buddy of mine said, we're going to get drunk tonight. Okay, sounds good. What else, And it turns out over the years, he's not an alcoholic, but he told me, he said, let's get drunk. We were 14. We went down in the creek, and he said, now you steal some beer from the liquor store. Okay. And I'll get some cooking wine, and we'll get some bourbon out of my dad's cabinet. Well, let's go down there and get drunk. So we did, and magic happened. All of a sudden, I felt good about being me. All of a sudden, we went down to a party where there were some girls and stuff, and hey, we were happening. We went down to the bowling alley. We were drunk. We were 14, and we were drunk. And I said, this is, wow, I didn't know life could be like this. So it wasn't like I started drinking obsessively at that time. I was 15, 16. By the time I was 16, I was drinking a little bit. 17, senior in high school, and I started to drink quite a lot. By that time, my parents were divorced. They got a divorce, and sometimes kids take it on themselves. It's kind of like maybe it's my fault or something like that. But my dad he was kind of an absentee dad in a lot of ways. He wasn't around a lot, and we didn't have a very good relationship. And I sided with my mother on that divorce, you see, and I blamed my dad. So that put a big wall between me and him. And I just, I went to this one college and they threw me out for drinking. I was 18. 19, I talked my way into another college. They threw me out for drinking. One thing that I had that was good was music. My mom and dad, in spite of their many difficulties and in spite of their weird idiosyncrasies, they both loved music. They were not professional musicians at all, but there was always records playing in the house and the radio on, and there was a piano and a little organ, and I got good on the piano. I started to kind of teach myself, and then when I was about in high school, I started taking classical piano lessons, and I got real good. One thing about music, you can hide behind it when you're practicing. It's a solitary activity, so you can, when there's trouble in the household or if there's anything, you just go practice. You just practice by the hour. By the time I was 18, 19, I didn't need college. I was good enough to get a job in bars, playing the piano 5 nights a week. I got me an apartment, I got me a car, I was making money, and I was playing in this one piano bar where it was for the highway patrol in California, where they hung out, where they were off duty. And I was about 19 years old. You got to be 21 in California, and they would buy me drinks, and there was a shelf behind the piano, and there was just all these drinks, and I would just get wasted, and a lot of women and drinking and those people, and of course when you're a musician, the boss, he buys you drinks himself because he knows you're better when you're drunk. So it's an investment in his business. He wants to see you get wasted and all that. He doesn't care if you're in the parking lot smoking marijuana. He loves it. It's good for business. So I did that for a while. I wound up in Los Angeles, and I was working in a place playing the piano, and a girl walked in there, and she's pretty nice, and it turned out to be my first wife. And I thought it was kind of weird because I wasn't sure how much I should drink. When I first went over to her apartment, I said, well, she's a pretty nice girl. I tried to gauge it. Do you know what I mean? You try to figure out where you're not falling down, but you're still loose and right. And that got harder and harder to find that zone. It got real. In fact, I want to tell you a funny story about that. But she loved me, and she was a good woman. And she ended up throwing me out. I'll get to that. But she said, you could do well in this business. Why don't you set your sights kind of high, become a recording artist, become a studio musician? You've got the talent. You're good enough. And we set things in motion. And I did do a few things. And I made a couple of records and stuff, Now, some records go platinum, or they go gold or platinum, but my records went linoleum. But I think drinking had a lot to do with that, too. But she said, let's do this. So, what was I going to say? Well, I had a drinking buddy by that time. I always had a drinking buddy. And this was Randy. He's the guy that found AA. Bless his heart. And he stayed sober for a long time. I haven't seen him in decades, but Randy, God bless him. So him and me, we used to go out and get drunk, and then we'd come back I moved in with her, so it was her apartment to begin with, but it was our place, and we were married 7 years, and he would come over there, and she didn't like him because of vomit and stuff like that, And, I thought he was a cool guy, but it got to the point where she said, Randy's got to sleep in your truck. If he's going to crash here, he's going to sleep in the truck. So he agreed to that. He'd sleep out in the truck. But he kept hanging around, and I liked Randy. And he understood. That's another thing about being an alcoholic. We look for people that understand because we're in great pain. Other drinkers, they understand. They'll pour another one. Anyway, Randy understood. So finally, one day my wife said, look, you're going to have to choose. It's either me or Randy. So Randy and I headed up the coast. We had no place to go, so we went up to my mom's house. That's when he found AA. And he said, I want to take you to an AA meeting. I went to a couple of meetings, but I said, geez, I'm glad I'm not as bad as those people. I was a full-blown alcoholic, trust me. By that time, I was a full-blown alcoholic, but I said, if I was as bad as those people, I would quit too. God bless them. I hope they find their way. I'll just keep on going the way I am. Thank you very much. He gave me a big book, and I first opened it up, I remember, because I had to sleep on the couch at my mom's house, and I'm reading the stories going, God, that's amazing. Wow, I'm so glad I'm not like that. Wow. And I was. I was in total denial. So after that, I moved down to San Diego, and I kind of got my career going again. I was kind of like, that was almost like a mini Bonham at first, and then I wound up in San Diego working the clubs and put a band together, and we got an album deal, and we made an album, and we went and toured in Europe. We toured in Europe, and I never drew a sober breath on that tour. It was 1982. It was a disaster. I was the leader. I was the front man, but I couldn't. The guys couldn't trust me how I would be, and they were nice guys too, good musicians. And I was the only alcoholic. But that tour, it was a disaster. We made some money, but 1983, a year later, we repeated the same thing, and that was even worse than the first one. 1984, I tried to get sober. I kind of tried. I came into AA again, and I said, well, I like the first 3 steps, but I don't like that step 4. That's kind of scary. Not scary, terrifying. I had so much garbage inside of me, I just couldn't work step 4. I'll find my own way to work these steps. They're good, they work for people, they're going to work for me. I have a kind of a higher power now. I'm going to work steps 1, 2, and 3, but I just ain't going to work that step 4. I just don't. I'll figure out a way not to do that. And I stayed sober for 8 months. And I believe that my lack of facing honestly step 4 is one of the primary reasons why I went out. Another primary reason why I went out in 1984 after 8 months sobriety was because of a resentment. Resentments are the chief enemy of recovery. And I went out on a resentment. By this time I was living with a girl and her sons. And she wanted me to buy these presents for her sons at Christmas time that I thought were lavish. And I was working, but I was always working as a musician, and making money. But I felt I got a resentment going. It was Christmas time, and I said, well, what about me? I went out and I got drunk. And that was a very bad bottom. I went out for a year and a half. And at the end of that year and a half, I had lost everything. I had got strung out on crystal meth. We started with the cocaine. Hey, cocaine, slick, and drink. You could drink a lot and do cocaine, and be part of the hip crowd and everything. And every dollar I went started going for cocaine. And here I've got this other man's children under my roof, but that didn't seem to faze me. There wasn't enough groceries in the house, but I had to be with cocaine. And then I discovered crystal meth. And then it got to be, well, I know we all have our own personal hell, but that was my personal hell. At first, I could stay 2 inches off the ground for days at a time. I could just drink with impunity. I could just drink and drink and drink and still walk around and still function, not pass out. But I got to where I was hearing things and seeing things, and I would see bugs crawling on me that weren't really there. And I was having some difficulties in life. I mean, I wasn't any kind of paying bills. I just turned into just an evil person. My life got to where people would offer me gigs in nice clubs and hotels, and I would turn them down because I wanted to play over here in this biker bar for drinks and tips. I was more at home over there because they understood. And the tips were crystal meth. And I'd rather be over there in that biker bar, banging them out on an old piano. It got pretty bad. It got so bad that one night, and it was all her fault, of course. You know, what? None of this was my fault. How could it be? No, I was a cool guy. It got so bad that one night I threw a giant glass ashtray, big heavy ashtray, at her head with the intention of killing her. By the grace of God, I missed. She ducked. It made a big hole in the wall, and she said, "Get out." And I did. I went out. I went out into the night air, and I started walking. And I started walking, and somehow I got a bottle or something. I was okay if I had a bottle, I figured. I don't remember too much about that night, except that sleeping in a car or under a car or something. And I made my way over to some people's house that I knew and was able to sleep on their couch for a night or two. And I decided that I would try AA again. I decided that maybe there was a chance. I was just, all I was chicken. I just wanted to live. I just was coward. I just wanted to live. I just didn't want to die. And I think that ashtray deal was a kind of a moment of clarity. And I made my way into some AA meetings. And I had another moment of clarity. There was this little old lady, real fresh scrubbed little lady with perfect little makeup and her earrings and all that. She was standing by the door of this meeting. She was greeting people, you see. And I was in this jacket that I had. It came from Korea. It was a slick little kind of a jacket, kind of a cool jacket when I got it. But see, after a couple of weeks out on the street, sleeping on people's couches and under a car and stuff, the jacket didn't look so good. And plus, I was a wreck. I was a wreck. And I remember going into that meeting, and this wasn't the first meeting back, but one of them, it might have been the first one back. It's all real fuzzy, kind of blacked out. And I remember her standing there real fresh and pretty and saying, "Hello." And I brushed past her, and I kind of bumped into her. I didn't mean to, but I brushed past her and kind of hit her with my elbow or something, and I said, "I belong here." And she turned around and she said, "So do I." And I thought, what have I got in common with this little old lady? But I heard myself say, "I belong here. I belong here." And when I felt that day coming into that room, I felt like I was home. I feel the exact same way right now with y'all. God bless you. This is where I belong. And this is where I have a feeling of belonging, a sense of belonging. This is my home, and you're my family. Now, at the time, that didn't, oh, by the way, if I bumped into a little old lady like that today, I'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, excuse me. Oh, are you okay?" But back then, I just, so self-centered and so ugly, and so I remember I had growth. Anyway, that's the way it is. But when the people used to say, "Well, we'll love you until you can love yourself," that didn't make any sense to me. I wasn't in here to love myself. That was impossible. I don't want to love myself. I just want to maybe live a little. I don't want to die with this drinking and drugs. "We'll love you until you can love yourself." Well, you can try, but I ain't going to love myself. There's nothing there to love. All right? There's nothing there to love. People talk about loving yourself or do self-nurturing things. Or I'd look at successful men and say, how do they do that? How do they get that way? How do they come home to a family? How do they pay bills? That's a mystery to me. That's like life on Mars or something for me. I had to either be the center of the universe or else I was just a worthless piece of garbage. The worst piece of garbage the universe ever revolved around. So anyway, that began my trek. That was around March 1st, 1986. I actually got sober in February. I can't remember exactly. But that began my trek. Then I was going to this church meeting. I was staying at different people's houses. I started to bathe and do things like that because personal hygiene had gone out the window. So now I'm all of a sudden kind of a member of the human race again. And a man came up to me. I used to share all the time because, see, I had been in AA before, so I knew the ropes, and all that. Scared to work for step 4, but still, I knew the ropes. I'd share, and everything. I'd share about how it was all her fault, and you'd drink too if you had my problems. And that's about like what my shares sounded like, And people would say, Flint, why don't you grab somebody after the meeting, son? You know? And anyway, I was a wreck, and this man came up to me and he said, son, you're really messed up. You might just make it. Call me anytime, and he put his card in my hand. Now, he didn't exactly say, son, you're really messed up. He said it in a different way. He used a different word than messed up. He said it more colorful, but I don't want to say that word here. And I did. I called him up. He became my sponsor. His name was Russ, and he was my sponsor for 18 years. I believe Russ was the first human being I ever loved, ever really loved. I used to say I loved people. I used to say, oh, I love her so much, and that wasn't that. I wanted to take her hostage, or I wanted to manipulate her, or I wanted to get her to do what I wanted, or she was like a paper mache figure. Like, that's what people in the world were to me. They were like paper mache figures. You just move them around. You just put them the way you want them and stuff like that. That's all. And so when I said, I love you, anyway, Russ was my sponsor. And we started very, slowly. I didn't want to tell him all my secrets or anything like that. I didn't need anybody. I grew up in a household where we didn't need anybody. And I still have trouble with that sometimes, that interdependence of human beings. I'm very happy to walk. If I don't like a situation, that's something that, not to need somebody. I don't know, I got burned early on or something, but anyway, I didn't want to need a sponsor. I never wanted to reach out to another man. I never wanted to be, I just didn't want to be close to another man or really a woman. The whole being close to another human being just terrified me. But slowly, Russ and I started working the steps. And slowly, after about a year, I ventured into step 4. And I wrote an honest step 4. I really did. I wrote everything. I put it all down on paper. And over a 3-week period, we met and we would talk. I'd read a little and we'd talk a little, and he'd tell me his stuff, some of it, and then we'd share like that. And at the end of that, I felt like I'd worked a thorough step 4 and 5. And then I began to not have so much fear. I really began to feel that, because when you don't work step 4, every meeting you go to is about step 4, right? They're always talking about step 4. And so all of a sudden now I'm one of those guys in AA. I've got about a year and a half, and I've worked step 4 and 5, and I had a $100 car. I had no car when I got here because I sold the wheels off it for crystal meth. I sold the wheels and tires for $50 a piece. I could use the 200. There were children in the house. We lived out in the country, but it made sense to me to sell. The car ran too, but now it was up on blocks. So I had no car when I got sober. That's why I was walking around and all that. So somebody sold me a $100 car, a newcomer car, and I had that car, and I'd go to the noon meetings. And then after the noon meeting, and I also inherited a Springer Spaniel. Her name was Puppy. She was a puppy, but I could never come up with a name for her, so I called her Puppy. Me and Puppy used to go to the meetings, the noon meetings, and then afterwards I'd go to the park, and there was this slab there where they used to have those outdoor plays. You know, they have those outdoor theatrical events. The audience sits up there with a picnic on the grass, and in the afternoon there'd be nobody there, so me and Puppy would be there. And I just feel good because I just got out of a meeting, and I'd pretend that I was doing a show. I would pretend like, because by this time, you know, I was still early in sobriety. I hadn't really worked. And I would pretend that I was waving to the audience, you know, and I would pretend like I was walking out here to this imaginary piano, and I would pretend to sit down. If any passerbys, they think I was nuts, you know. And I'd pretend like there's puppies around, you know, smelling the trees and stuff like that. And I'm pretending that I'm giving a concert, see. And I'm pretending that, so anyways, the agent called me back, and I did another tour of Europe. And I did it sober this time. The bass player had to convince the agent that I was going to show up and do these things. I did 8 tours of Europe after that, all the way up until about 92. We did 8 more tours of Europe, and I did them sober. And I was really a good leader, really a conscientious leader and a good performer. We made 2 more albums, and all of that was a gift of sobriety. I also set my sights on Las Vegas. I imagined when I was out there in jeans and a t-shirt waving, I imagined that I'd be in a nice costume and that I'd be walking out onto a Las Vegas stage. I imagined that in my mind. And I had read about doing those sorts of things, but it worked. Because even if I wasn't touring in Europe, I was performing in Las Vegas. And I got to where I bought a house in Las Vegas. And I did so with the money from one of the European tours. They paid us in cash, and I had this giant wad of cash, and I brought it home in a money belt. There was $12,000, and it was a down payment on a house. I couldn't believe it. I had to pinch myself. And it was in a money belt, and I took a picture of it on the bed. There's all these bills, this Deutschmarks, and they're folded because it was in the money belt. If anybody ever wants to see that picture, I'll show it to you. I didn't bring it tonight, but that was really something, you know. So I got that house. Then times went slow too at times in Las Vegas. You know, the musician's life is like this. A professional entertainer, it's like this. You never know. So anyway, but that happened. Las Vegas happened. Then all of a sudden, my wife and I were visiting one night. I said, I want to do college campuses. I think I'd go over pretty good there, and I think it'd be fun to do that. So I called this agent that I knew in New York. He said, sorry, man, we don't do college campuses. Okay. So this was in about 98. Let's see. I got sober in 86. So 96. I had about 12 years sober. And he called me back, and he said, did you ever think about doing cruise ships? And I said, well, yeah, I'd like to do cruise ships. He said, fine, I'll get you on a cruise to Hawaii in 3 weeks. He said, you have to have the sheet music for the band. There's a band with trombone, trumpet, and guitar, and drums, and bass, and you have the sheet music, the music charts for the band. And I said, oh, yeah, I do. And I didn't. And he said, well, fine, then you'll be in Hawaii in 3 weeks. Okay, have the charts with you. Okay, so I called up a guy I knew, a Las Vegas arranger. He worked with all these famous people. Hey, Bob, I said, what would you charge me to do? I need 20 songs. I need show A and show B. What would you charge me to do that? He said, I'll make you a special deal. How about $1,000 per song? I said, forget it. I had, you know. So I went like this on the kitchen table. I went like this, and I moved it like this. And I sat down there with a blank sheet music, because this was before kind of computers and software that would write music notes. And at a thrift store, I had got a book that was on the shelf over there about how to write music. And I got that book, and I told Cheryl, my wife, I said, honey, you can't talk to me for 3 weeks. I'm going to be busy here. And I did this, and then I'd take it to my friends that were gigging around town, or take it over to these, what do you think of this chart? The bass player goes, doom, 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 is that right? The guy would go, yeah, that's right. Why don't you do this? Change that A to an A sharp. And I got the charts. I did them myself. And then we went to Hawaii. My wife was a guest. And I'm on the stage with the orchestra having a rehearsal. My wife's up in the balcony praying, dear Lord. And the rehearsal went well. The charts worked. So I did cruise ships for 8 years. We did cruise ships for 8 years up until 2006. And it was a dream come true. It was one of the blessings of recovery. And I've had a career. I can only thank God for this career. This career is the direct result of being sober and learning how to say what I mean and mean what I say. In 2006, I gave up everything to go back to my hometown and take care of my mother. She was dying. And she had a sober son. My sister had died. My dad was losing it mentally. They were divorced, and he was on the other side of town. There were times when my wife would take care of him, and I'd stay and take care of my mom. We became caregivers around the clock. No more cruise ships. No more working as a musician. Just taking care of my mom. And we kind of moved in with her. She was in a coma the last 7 months of her life. And I learned patience by taking care of her. For 2 years, we were hands-on caregivers around the clock. We had other caregivers, but we had to supervise them. And she died in 2010. She died. She had a sober son. She had a responsible son, one that knew how to love. It was Russ, my sponsor, that taught me how to love. He was my sponsor for 18 years. Because he's the first person I really cared about. I had that deep, deep feeling of concern for Russ when he got sick. I knew that this was a new feeling for me, a feeling of being able to love somebody besides myself. And so we took care of my mom with love. We took care of my dad with love. And my mom passed in 2010. And when I was going through her things, I went through a file cabinet and I found a folder in there with, my 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day chips. I must have sent them to her and I forgot about it. She saved them. She put them in a file cabinet. They must have meant the world to her, eh? They must have meant the world to her. And my dad, too. There were 10 years when I didn't even speak to him following their divorce. And then after my mom passed, my dad and I were driving around, and I used to take him to lunch, and he said, you know something, son? We've always had a great relationship, haven't we? Because he was losing it mentally a little bit, and he forgot that I remember one time I was drunk and I punched a window out because I said, come on. And I wanted to punch him. I wanted to fight him. He forgot all about that stuff. The good Lord made us have a wonderful relationship over the years of recovery, and especially at the end of his life. And he died in 2011. But the longer I stay sober, the more I understand that it's all God. God's just doing this. I still try to think things out. I've never been able to figure anything out. And you know, we try, don't we? We try to figure something out. We can't figure this out. It's all a gift as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion. It's just a gift. I don't know why I should be so fortunate as to have this gift. All I came in here for was just, I was afraid to die. That's pretty much it. I was killing myself. Maybe I knew that it was insane. Maybe I just had some hope. I think that day that Russ said, son, you might just make, you really messed up, you might just make it. I think that gave me hope. I said, well, if that old guy thinks I have a chance, maybe I do. After being in and out, I'm one of those people that was in and out. And I want to tell you guys a quick thing. This is how I think I want to close with this message. I have found a vehicle. It's like a car in a way, but not that kind of vehicle, a different. But imagine, if you will, a vehicle that you can get that will take you from here to where you want to be, where you need to be, where the real you is, where the real me is, like a vehicle where I'm doing God's will and I know it, and I'm comfortable in my own skin 100%, and I know it, and I have faith, and I have my character defects kind of under control. A vehicle that would take me to that wonderful place where life makes sense, where I'm a good man, and I feel like a good man, and I'm helpful to others, and I'm kind, I'm patient, those kinds of things. How do I get to be that man? I want to be that man. I want to pay my bills, and I want to treat my woman right, and I want to feel okay about myself. I don't want to be intimidated by some other man because he's stronger or richer or something. I just want to have just a good life. How do I get that? How does that happen? How do I get there? And I found a vehicle that would take me there. And that vehicle is self-respect. My self-respect will take me there. If I have self-respect, I'll be doing God's will. I'll be a good man. I'll be helpful to others. I'll be all those things that I talked about. If I have self-respect, I'll stay away from things that are bad for me. Now, that's not easy for an alcoholic like me because my default setting is to go towards things that are kind of bad for me, whether it's lust or greed or those kind of things, those character defects. That's almost my default setting with this disease, I mean. So I want to stay in that vehicle. I want to give myself to those principles that we learn in here. I want to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. There's no way I can drink and get away with it. I want to have a higher power of my own understanding. And that higher power, that concept of my higher power has changed over time. And I reserve the right to have it change. I reserve the right to try different things, or to pray different ways, or to think about God different ways, or to invite him into my heart different ways maybe, or find a way that works for me. And I have found that. And all these things lead to that self-respect I'm talking about. And if I'm going to have that kind of a life, that's going to be self-respect that gets me there. Now, I don't have self-respect every day. I mean, I kind of do, but there's some days are really nice, and some days maybe I start to go this way a little bit. Or maybe I yell at my wife, or maybe something, or maybe I don't know. The road's gotten a lot narrower, though. I'll tell you what, I can't tell those white lies I used to tell and get away with it. Those character defects, they don't have the appeal they once did. There's not much that life has to offer outside God's will. Thank you for having me tonight. God bless you all. Thank you.